Hello, I'm Kingsley Singleton, and welcome to another video lesson from Digital Photo. This month we're showing you how to take and make your best ever silhouette pictures. In the magazine there's a ton of shooting advice to help you get things right on location. But no matter how good a photographer you are, we'd always advise shooting in RAW mode when taking pictures like this, because of the amount of flexibility it offers you after the event. The image that we're going to use for this tutorial is on this month's CD. It's called pylon.dng. All you need to do to get started is just open it up in your copy of Photoshop CS, CS2, Elements 3 or Elements 4. And as you can see from this picture in its unaltered state, we managed to get it pretty much okay out in the field. We picked a nice simple structure that we knew would respond really well to a bit of backlighting, and we chose a time of day which was guaranteed to throw up some really nice colours in the sky. And for most silhouettes, this is the combination you're looking for. A nice, bright, interesting sky, and a dark, bold subject in front of it. But even a fairly acceptable unprocessed RAW file like this can benefit from a bit of tweaking in your RAW conversion. And that's what we're going to show you how to do. Just make some minor alterations to get the best out of the picture. Essentially, as the shadows are already pretty much there, we're just going to be adding a bit of extra contrast and saturation to the sky. And we can tell that we've got a nice lot of shadow in the image just by looking at the histogram. As you can see, it's pretty much clumped towards the left end of the scale, but we've got this one very strong line here indicating there's a lot of black in the picture. But what we can also do is click on our shadows clipping box, and you'll see that all the areas that are in complete shadow turn blue. On a normal image you'd want some detail in the shadow areas, but on a silhouette this is exactly what we're looking for. Also, just make sure that your preview box is checked, otherwise any changes that you make to these sliders won't appear on screen. And before we begin, we also need to make sure that the right things are happening next to where it says Settings. When you load the image into the RAW converter, it may have Camera Raw Default selected. Now this isn't what we want. What we do want is something called Camera Default. And you'll find that on some versions of Photoshop, but in CS2, which is what I'm using, we're just going to come down to Custom so that we make sure that all these auto settings are off. And this is the image exactly as the camera captured it. That's the starting point that we want. So now let's have a look at how changes we make here on the right hand side of the palette affect the image. First we need to make sure that we're on the Adjust tab. Now some versions of Photoshop, like Elements or CS, will have fewer tabs than this, but essentially the principles are the same for any version you use. Right, the first change we're going to make is to the white balance. We're going to click on this arrow next to where it says As Shot, and we're going to pick Daylight. And as soon as I click on that, you'll see that the sky turns a lot more blue. You'll also notice that our temperature has dropped. It was up at around 6800, but we want it down here at around 5500, which is the daylight setting. And as you can see, if I drag the temperature all the way down to the left, so it's very low, we lose all the warmth in the sky and it just becomes very blue. And if I take it the opposite direction, everything warms up. But we're just going to come back to daylight. And in this instance you can leave the tint on +10, but if you do want to experiment with it, taking it to the left will introduce more green into the picture, and taking it to the right will introduce more magenta. And next we're going to come down to the exposure slider. And basically shifting this to the left is just like allowing less light into your camera, and to the right again is the opposite. We're going to leave it at 0. The shadows we are going to increase, and what I'm going to do is just click on the shadow clipping warning so that we get our blue areas back again, and we're just going to move it up to around 12. And as you can see, a lot more of the picture has turned that clipping blue. And if I were to move it up even higher, you'll see that the blue starts coming in all over the place, meaning that more of the image is pure black. And we're going to leave that at around 12 so that we get some of these blue areas in the pylon indicating pure black, but we don't darken the sky too much because we don't want to lose the silhouette in all the gloom. And we'll just untick the shadows clipping preview, and then we'll come down to brightness. And this we're going to push up to around 80. And as I do that, you can see that the sky is getting lighter. And we don't want to push it too far because we start losing some of those nice colours in the sky. We're going to keep it down here at around 80. The contrast we're just going to push up to about 30. And finally, on this page of the raw converter, we're going to push the saturation up to plus 40 to really liven up those colours in the sky. The next step is to click on the Detail tab, and this brings up some more options. We've got sharpness, luminance smoothing, and colour noise reduction. Now for this image, we're going to leave all these values alone. But if we were going to open this image into Photoshop afterwards and continue the editing, we'd bring the sharpness down to 0, because it's always best to add sharpness as the final stage of your editing process. We'll just move that back up to 25. We'll leave luminance smoothing where it is, and for colour noise reduction we're also going to leave it at 25. But depending on the image that you're using, you may want to push this a little bit higher, as what it does, as you can see in this zoomed in view, is it removes some of the interference in areas of flat colour like this blue sky. You can see here we've got some little pink pixels starting to creep in, but when we move it back to 25 we get a nice even colour. And then we'll just hit Ctrl and 0 to come back to our full view. Now the next tab we're going to click on, the Lens tab, is only available in Photoshop CS and CS2. And we can use this to just ever so slightly correct some of the fringing that's going on around our shadowed areas. As you can see, we've got a little bit of redness appearing above the girders and a little bit of blue appearing below. So what we need to do is take a look at our red and cyan fringing slider. Now just like all the other sliders in the raw converter, you can push and pull this around as much as you want. It's all about using different amounts for individual pictures, and in this case we're going to bring it down to around -30, just to take some of that fringing away. We will leave the other settings as they are, and finally we'll come on to the Calibrate tab. And I'll just come out to a full view again so we can get a good idea of what's going on when we start moving these sliders around. So here we can control the individual hues and saturations of the red, green and blue colours that go to make up the picture. And what we're most interested in is these saturation sliders. But once again, it's all really about pushing and pulling them around to see what kind of effects you get. As you can see in this case, as I move the red hue slider to the right, we're getting more yellow down here in the sky, and as I move it back to the left, we're getting some slightly warmer pinky tones. And because these look quite nice, we'll leave the red hue slider down here at about -25. Then we're going to increase the saturation of reds, pushing this slider up to around +30. We don't want to push it too far because if I do that, you'll see we start getting these colours blocking out and becoming quite unsightly. The green hue we'll leave alone, but the green saturation we're going to increase as well, up to around +50, just to make the colours a bit more punchy. Again, we'll leave the blue hue alone, but the blue saturation we'll push up again to around +50. So there you have it. That's the end of our raw conversion, and just look at the difference we've made. We've got a much punchier picture with loads of lovely deep black shadows, and we've got some really nice colours in the sky, from warm reds and yellows down here to cool blues at the top of the picture. And at this point you can either click Save to save the file with the settings you've made, or Open to bring it up in your version of Photoshop and continue the editing process. But we're all done for now, so I'll see you next time.